Entrepreneurs on born that brew. You are now listening to the Entrepreneur Podcast with your host, Adam McChesney. Let's grow!
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Adam McChesney, and I want to thank you for being here. It's actually the first episode that I'm doing post being a father. So super excited about this one. Super excited about my guest today. And if you're listening, please be sure to subscribe to the show and leave us a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. We would love for you to share this on social media by tagging me and our guests, and this way we can get this incredible content out to more people. Today's guest and I just got connected for the first time a few months ago through an online community called Connected Leaders Academy. We were chatting over Zoom a few months ago, and we were chatting back and forth and just realized how many times we could have potentially ran into each other just to me living in Colombia, and that's where he currently lives, and being in a lot of the same circles. He's an incredibly bright mind, one of the brightest minds I've met, and he's accomplished so much in a short period of time, dating all the way back to when he was in college, and we'll kind of get into some of that here in a little bit. But my guest today is Daniel Burke-Aguero. He's an executive coach, speaker, author, ultra-marathon athlete, leader, trainer, father, husband, and much more, which we'll find out today. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, man. Thanks for having me. That intro was so good. It's almost like I helped you write it.
You did help me write it, yeah. And I'm glad that you did because you do so much. And I know we had a chance to chat a couple months ago, and just really loved your energy. I think, when you meet all of these people online, it's not that, you don't enjoy it, because it's always good to get connected with people. But when you have the same energy, when you're going through a lot of the same things, and I know we were talking about me becoming a father and some of the stuff you had passed on to me as advice, it's just really good to connect with those types of people that understand, even we were chatting before this of the fatigue of less sleep and things like that as a high level entrepreneur, performer, things like that. So appreciate you coming on today, man. And if you wouldn't mind just kind of getting the audience started, telling everybody a little bit about who you are, where you come from, and a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, sweet. So super short version. I think at the core of who I am, what I do, what I love doing, I'm a coach. I think that is my primary function in life when it comes to like this business world. I get to partner with high-level entrepreneurs, business owners, and help them see the forest through the trees, right? I had it explained one time that I get to help develop people who develop companies, who develop communities, and that's ultimately how we change the world. So I've been in different facets, and we can talk about different things and stuff, but I've been in sales leadership in different forms, essentially my entire working career, my entire adult life, right? And I love it, man. It's always been a blessing. It's always been a challenge. There's been ups, there's been downs, there's been success, there's been failure, there's been rebuilding, there's been triumphs. But I just think ultimately where I land in life is I'm at my best when I'm in service to other people, and when I have autonomy to sink or swim.
I love that sink or swim analogy, and autonomy is huge. I think one of the things that I thought was just fascinating about your background was what you had talked to me, and I kind of knew about just, from knowing a little bit about your LinkedIn and seeing some of that stuff of when you got started in door-to-door sales. And I think a lot of people start out, obviously, a lot of entrepreneurs, I would say, start out in some sort of sales role. And, entrepreneurship is, whether you've been in sales or not, it's selling something every single day in one way or another. So talk to us a little bit about like what got you started there and some of the things that you went through and how you were able to position yourself for the future, dating all the way back to when most people don't have jobs or not really making money.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And it's just wild, right? Thinking back through the mutual overlap of people and places and time, right? So when I was like a lot of people, I think I got my start in sales, I could say as a kid selling candy bars and popcorn, right? But my real true exposure, what you're alluding to, I was 18 years old. I was a freshman at the University of Missouri. I was selected for the oldest summer internship in the United States with the oldest direct sales company in the country, Southwestern Advantage. And yeah, as an 18-year-old kid, I moved about 1,200 miles from home to a place I'd never been before. And I sold essentially modern day encyclopedias door to door, 85 hours a week, straight commission the whole summer. And it was wild. Yeah, knocking on doors, selling books. And this was 2009. So we're not even talking about like I'm selling books,
Yeah.
And yeah, it was wild. I ended up doing pretty well enough that I actually ended up coming back for 6 summers. Ended up fully paying my way through school, doing that, recruiting, trading, leading teams. Ended up meeting my wife through that, Alicia, right? And yeah, I ended up knocking on over 25,000 doors before I was 24. And so, yeah, I think when it doesn't matter what you do, but when you're placed in a situation, and for me, it was as a young adult, when you're placed in a situation that allows you to test your discipline, your drive, your focus, your grit on a daily basis. And I think obviously you can relate to that, from like the sports side of it, right? Is like, it reveals so much about what's inside of you. And I mean, again, looking back on it, I didn't realize the impact it would have had on the entire trajectory of the rest of my life. When as an 18-year-old kid, I was like, yeah, I'll give it a shot. We'll see what happens, Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
That's amazing. And what were some of the key things? I know a lot of people have been in door-to-door sales in some sort of facet, but what were some of the key things? 'Cause I'm sure there was a lot of profound lessons that you learned, but what are some of the key things and takeaways that you had from that experience, specifically over 6 years?
Yeah. I think if I was to distill it down to 2 or 3, key principles or key thoughts, I think one is just the power of focus. Ultimately, the power of having, something in front of you to work towards, but also recognizing where you're at in the moment. And, it's interesting looking back over my 6 summers. There were some summers where I was at the top of the leaderboard and some summers where I did well, but I, wasn't at the bottom, but I also wasn't at the top. And looking back on those, you could almost see what was going on in my life, because some summers I had a very clear vision for the future that I valued. I was connected in my purpose to the present. And there were some summers where I was maybe a little more aimless in my focus, right? And obviously the results came from that. But you can then trace that, I think, through every other thing I've done in my life, is that when and I think this is true for any entrepreneur, when we have a clear vision that we value, right? That value, connecting our purpose to the present, actually allows us to shape our decision-making process when it's maybe sometimes hard to do. So I think that'd be the first principle. I think the second principle, that again, it's a constantly evolving thing, but I really dug into the concept of self-talk, essentially what we say to ourselves about ourselves, that our mind, if left unchecked, right, can either be our greatest asset or our greatest enemy, right? That we can consciously choose to feed ourselves and reprogram maybe some subconscious patterns. And yeah, I think that was something that I think I evolved in over my time, and I've really grown a lot in even since then, is that I think for a long time I thought positive self-talk or focusing on the right things was like positive puking almost is what we used to call it, right? It's like, it's all sunshine and rainbows, oh boy, right? It's like, but and I did that actually for I think like my first 2, maybe even 3 summers. I just tried to force my way into positive thinking, right? It's easier to act your way into positive thinking than it is to think your way into positive acting. I heard that quote from Rory Vaden once, but I think over time I've come to realize it, and I think some of this comes with just maturity, is just recognizing that true positive self-talk isn't pretending like there aren't problems. It's accepting things as they are, having a vision that you value enough that you want to fight for it, and then choosing the step that leads us towards that, instead of unconsciously choosing the steps that lead us farther away from it.
There's a lot to take away from there, and I think one of the things that I kind of heard and kind of reiterated was that focus. And I think especially, it's something that I try to really, really harp on, but I even struggle with at times, especially in today's society where you're, as an entrepreneur, you're trying to juggle all these different plates. There's social media, there's the phone, there's emails that are literally nonstop. What are some, hacks or tips that you have to just like on a daily basis, you're looking at your calendar and you're like, all right, this 30 minutes is blocked off here, this hour here. Like what would you recommend to somebody that's like, man, I need to be hyper focused for the next 90 days?
Yeah, well, I think you even just said it without even meaning to say it. Is you said the word calendar.
Yeah.
Right now, again, it doesn't have to be a Outlook calendar or a pen and paper, but there's that phrase. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right? And I think there's layers to all of this, right? But I think I've been privileged to over the last 5 years now work with a little over 100 different executives and business owners from all sorts of different backgrounds and facets, and you can actually see very clearly amongst people who are not just successful but continuing to grow versus people who are maybe successful but stagnant, right? If we're not growing, we're dying. There's another thought in there too, but the people who are consciously growing is they're really cognizant about how they're utilizing their time. And so focus, scheduling, it looks different for everybody. There are some clients, and I think I lean on this side of it. I'm like a color code, plan the whole week out minute by minute as best I can on a Sunday, sit down for an hour. Like that's my happy place. I love a color coded Excel spreadsheet, baby. Let's go. But some clients and some people, they crumble at the idea of that level of structure. And so for somebody like that, like maybe like a Pomodoro timer, right? Of saying like, hey, for today, what are my top 2 or 3 things? That's it. What are my top 2 or 3 things that need to get done? What are my 1 or 2 windows that I can block off an hour? And then can I use just like a visual timer to give myself that representation of, hey, I've only got 45 minutes left. Got my little guy right here, right? So you just turn it and it starts ticking, right?
Love it.
Again,
yeah,
different strokes for different folks.
Yeah, no, I think it's finding what works best for you. But I think you got to figure out what you're going to commit to and then continue to push forward with, I think is obviously super important. So kind of want to dig into your journey, I think overall as a whole. I know obviously we kind of talked about some of the door-to-door stuff early on, getting into working for somebody else, and then kind of where you're at today. Because I know we kind of talked about that briefly, and it's coming back to me some where you were working, and then you guys were getting ready to start having a family, and you were kind of trying to figure out what was most important. So talk to us and kind of take us from that door-to-door experience to where you went after that, and kind of where you're at today.
Yeah. So, 6 years with Southwestern family companies, selling books, door to door, recruiting college kids to do it the same, building organizations, having a lot of fun doing it. But yeah, then I left. I went and did some service work. I actually lived in Mexico, in Puerto Vallarta, taught middle school band and orchestra for a couple months. It was like just some fun service work. But then when I moved back to the States, I spent almost the next 3.5, almost 4 years in total, in a couple different roles in business development, and then working with one of the largest VA lenders in the country, and building and being a loan officer. That aspect of life. It was really interesting. I think this is what you're referencing is I got to this point where on paper I had everything that I'd ever wanted. Like as a kid, my version of success, I was living it, right? We had a house. We didn't have a white picket fence. It was chain link, but hey, right? We got the house. We got the 2 dogs, golden doodles, right? Like I've got this job at this really, we'll call it a sexy employer, right? Like everybody's like, wow, that's the job to have if you're there. And yet, right, I have all this success. I felt kind of empty inside because I think I was living in this state of constant anxiety. I was living in this place of feeling like a cog in a machine. I was living in this place of feeling like I didn't have a lot of autonomy. And hindsight's 2020, right? I will always say that, right? Is that if I was put back in that situation today, could I have treated it differently, done it differently? Absolutely, right? But at the time, I felt kind of stuck. Now, simultaneously to that, my wife and I we're trying to get pregnant. We're talking about having kids. We went through a couple miscarriages. We've kind of had a journey in itself. And one day we get the green light, right? That, hey, I think this one should make it, right? Jonah is our son now. He's 4.5. And I started thinking through, I started asking everybody at where I was working, like, hey, what does paternity leave look like? Right? Because I think back to what we talked about earlier is having a clear vision that you value, right? Like understanding what you want, not what other people want. I wanted, what I envisioned was a season where I was able to support my wife and be present and be there for this literally once in a lifetime experience. And the constant narrative, the feedback I was getting from everybody else was, hey, after my kids were born, I was back in the office the same day. I was back in the office 2 days later, right? I was back in the office at the end of that week. I took a lot of time off and I was back in the office that next Monday. And I get it, right? Like I get it. We all have lives. We all have to, like, sometimes we're in situations where we have to do those hard things. But I took a step back and I asked myself, like, is that the kind of life I want? And I think ultimately I realized, like, no, it's not. I don't know what I want. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know, but I know that I have about 7 months now to figure this out, because I'd rather be broke and be at home and be here for my wife and my kids than to continue to live like a cog in a machine, stuck, and just living in that place of I don't want to say hopelessness, but that's, I think, probably how I felt at the time. Right? So back to selling books. In 2009, as a freshman, my first summer, I lived with this guy named Anthony Merkel. And if somebody ever came to Columbia College to talk to you about selling books, it might have been me and it might have been Anthony at one point, right? But I lived with Anthony, and he was a good dude. He's one of my best friends. He was in our wedding. And he and one of my other best friends, Will, had both actually ended up at a place called Southwestern Consulting, Southwestern Coaching, right? And I'd seen their journey over the last couple of years, right? I'd seen what their life looked like, what they were doing, and it looked cool. But I don't know, it always felt like their thing, you know? But Anthony did such a good job. And I always reference this story when I talk to leaders about building, right? About planting seeds with the right people and leaving the door open. Is Anthony did such a good job leaving the door open for me for years. He never tried to hard recruit me and say, oh, you should leave and come here. But he was just like, man, you got your thing and it's good. But if you ever are even like a slight % interested in this, I think you'd crush it. And it'd be really fun to get the band back together, right? And so he was one of my first calls. I called Anthony because I respected the heck out of him. From what I knew about what he did, I respected, at least on paper, it seemed like a cool thing. I didn't know how it worked. Yeah. But, I was like, I'll give it a shot. And lo and behold, about 30 days later, I cashed everything in and started back at zero, with the kid on the way. Cashed in our 401k, drained the bank account, said, let's figure this thing out. And I went back to self-employed world. And I've been there ever since. Man, that's an incredible journey for a variety of different reasons. But I think, obviously going through a similar transition, like I understood a lot of it, obviously at different areas of a transition, but the sense of the purpose and the value of like, man, no, I really, really want to be there for, as you mentioned, this once in a lifetime season, this once in a lifetime experience. And I think so many people, I was even hearing people when I was having conversations, entrepreneurs, people that worked in other places, they were like, hey, what do you have in terms of your
paternity, leave plans. I'm like, well, I'm probably going to take, at least 2 weeks off and then do a bunch of stuff from home and then just kind of be there. And people are like, man, I was in the office later that day, that like a lot of the same things that you were hearing. And I was just like, man, I can't imagine that. And I'm not perfect. Would I do things differently next time? Of course, like I learned a lot throughout the process, but just to be able to say, hey, I made that decision and somebody else didn't make it for me, I think that also kind of plays into just understanding where my values are at and what's most important to me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And again, it's, I'll always put kind of the caveat on that, right? Is, man, what a privilege that we get to make those decisions,
Yes.
right? That we have been exposed to the right people and networks, and that we believe in ourselves enough to, and like there's all these layers to where like I get it. This isn't for everybody, right? Entrepreneurship is not for everybody. Cashing it all in and keeping your fingers crossed is not for everybody. I get it, but man, what a privilege and how grateful I am to be able to look back and say, like you said, that was my decision. I made the decision. I will reap the consequences. I will sink or swim.
Yep. Do or die, do or die. Love it. So taking a look at the entire journey, we've talked about a variety of different things. If you had to pinpoint one lesson that you could extract from everything and go pass that on to somebody that's an entrepreneur, where they're getting started or they've been, doing this for a very long time, that you're like, hey, if you can do this thing and take this lesson and go implement it, what would that one lesson be?
So I'm going to do a shameless plug for my TED Talk because I talked about this in it. But yeah, you can search for it. I think the one thing, and I've seen this both play out, and then also because I didn't do this, consequences happened. I've seen both sides of this happen in my life. I think the way that I always try to unpack this, and also I will say this is also, I think, gleaned from my journey, but then also working directly with so many high level leaders and hearing their stories over and over. And again, I'm sure you can feel the same way about this, but I think the most successful people in any aspect of life, in any arena, they connect their purpose to the present. And again, there's so much in that, but I think when we take the time to figure out for ourselves what our version of success looks like, not somebody else's, but when we can figure out our value system and what success looks like, and what maybe this season of success, what that long-term vision of success, what, like, the clearer we can figure out on what we want, the more likely we will be to take steps towards that. And then if success is just the compounding effect of the daily decisions we make, either leading us closer to or further from our version of success, then my argument is that it's actually that connection to our version of what we want that drives those daily decisions. And so there have been so many seasons in my life where I didn't really have a clearly defined like vision, purpose. I was just showing up, and the results kind of reflected. Sometimes those results were good, but I know they could have been better. There have been other seasons in my life where I figured out exactly what success looked like, and I lived into that purpose every single day, every single moment. And I would say, again, between the two, if I had to choose, the times when I am connected to my purpose to the present are the times when I'm most alive. They're the times when I'm, most fulfilled. They're the times that, regardless of the results, most of the time they happen. But it's just, life's more fun, man. When you're living on purpose.
Yep, it is. No, I love that lesson. Very well thought out. And, definitely hit some key points for me that I need to think about as well. And I think it's an ever evolving thing. You talk about purpose in the presence, and a lot of good takeaways there. So as we kind of wrap up the episode today, Daniel, one, I appreciate you coming on, man. This has been phenomenal, but talk to us a little bit about, obviously we know where you've been, where you have been coming to, and where you're at right now, but talk to us about some of the things you have going on for the future and what you're super excited about coming down the pipeline.
Boy, there's some stuff going down right now, live, right now, real time.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I think I find myself at a really interesting crossroads, right? So for the last 5 years, I've I took a step back, and I've essentially been working in a consulting and coaching capacity, right? And it's been awesome. It's been so fun. I've been building this business. I've been helping other people do the same. I've, been a team leader and all this stuff. But recently, there's been a couple opportunities that have presented themselves as maybe actually getting a chance to get back on the field, right? And so, what's to come? I don't really know. I think I need to work on clarifying my version of success and connecting in the present to that, because there's some big decisions ahead. But I think the ones I can share for now, I started authoring. I guess technically now I'm a published author, but starting authoring my first official All Mine book. So that's cool. Just speaking a lot more. It's been a lot of fun. But I guess my vision on that side of it is to be fully retired by 40. So I've got 6.5 years to do it. And I just think when I think of the word retirement, I don't think of like exiting the game or getting taken out, right? But rather just being in a place where we're fully work optional.
Yep.
I think I'm still going to work because I like working and I like helping people and I like impacting people. But I've just been having a lot of conversations lately about what it would take to get there and the kind of impact I could have on the world if my time wasn't tied to dollars.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, that's powerful. And
which is
I have no doubt you'll get
being
there.
of service and that's it,
That's amazing, man.
Yeah.
Well, excited to continue watching your journey and continue just supporting you in any way that I can, man. So thank you so much for coming on the episode today. Where can people stay connected with you online, whether that's a combination of social, websites, all that good stuff?
I think social is probably just the easiest way, direct people to one. It'd either be LinkedIn. I'm the only Daniel Burke-Aguero in the known universe, so you'll find me, right? Or Instagram. Again, D Burke-Aguero. It's pretty easy, but I'm there. Come find me. Let's hang out.
Awesome. We'll put all that stuff in the show notes. And again, thanks, Daniel, so much for coming on. I had a great time. Always great chatting with you. And we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, man. See ya.
And I want to thank you again to the audience for tuning in to today's episode. Please be sure, as always, to subscribe, download, and share our content. Leaving a 5-star review goes a long way. We'll see y'all next week. And remember, entrepreneurs aren't born, they are brewed.
I'm an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs aren't born, they're brewed. Thank you for listening to Entrepreneur Podcast with your host, Adam McChesney. Let's grow.